In the game of Big Brother, the power of veto might just be the only lifeline for nominees to hang on to. If you're on the block, it's the one surefire way to be safe from eviction, and it can be amazing if someone uses it to save you. However, one player's safety is another player's demise, and sometimes they don't see it coming. Blindsides are quite possibly the single most exciting thing to watch in Big Brother, and today we're going to look at some of the greatest. Consider subscribing if you aren't already, and without further ado, here are 5 of the craziest veto meeting blindsides of all time.
So I'm really sorry, Swaggy.
I don't care how many, like meditations or spiritual butterflies you throw at people, nobody is going to be able to trust your word, period.
Now, before we begin, I do have one honorable mention to go over, and it's a very iconic one. In fact, it was one of the first ever, and that's when Marcellus chose not to use the veto on himself at the final 5 of Big Brother 3, which subsequently led to his eviction a few moments later. Obviously, it's a blindside on one hand, because even though Danielle had put in work to try and convince Marcellus not to use the veto on himself, I doubt everyone actually expected that to happen. The main reason I didn't put it in this video though is because I feel that a truly great veto meeting blindside needs to have some sort of betrayal aspect to it, where someone is left angry or shocked or confused in a bad way. Whereas this blindside only negatively impacted Marcellus because he left himself on the block and susceptible to being voted out. It's one of Big Brother's most iconic moments, without question, which is why I'm giving it the mention, but I feel that it just misses out on the scope that I'm trying to portray with this topic, so it didn't make my official list.
They're sitting at home and they're like, use the veto, fool! I'm not gonna use it.
Okay, actually kicking things off, the first veto meeting blindside comes from one of my all-time favorite weeks of Big Brother, that being week 3 of Big Brother 24. Taylor had narrowly escaped eviction in both weeks 1 and 2, but once Turner won the week 3 HOH, history seemed destined to repeat itself, and the house was ready to target Taylor and send her home once and for all. During this point in the season, there was a duos twist, meaning that everyone in the house had a partner, and you could only be nominated or taken off the block alongside your partner. So the plan was for Turner to nominate the pair of Michael and Britney initially, and then whoever won the veto would use it to save them and replace them with the pair of Taylor and Nicole. Then, with Taylor sitting on the block with no way to save herself, the house could easily vote her out and continue on with the game. It seemed like a pretty solid plan, and things were going perfectly once Michael and Britney won the veto. All the pieces were set in place for Taylor to be nominated at the veto meeting, but one small slip-up happened that changed the entire course of the game. Alyssa accidentally let it slip to Kyle that she was in a girls' alliance, and it alerted Kyle to the fact that even though he thought he was in the majority, there was likely a core alliance within that majority that he wasn't a part of. After talking to some of the other guys he was aligned with, they started putting the pieces together and realized that they were all probably on the outskirts of their majority alliance, and that house guest Ameerah was the one calling all the shots, and that she was the head of the snake. So, the boys put in motion a plan to bring in the other players they thought were on the outs and form a 7-person alliance called the Leftovers, which just so happened to include Taylor, and they made a plan that would turn the house upside down. At the veto meeting, Michael and Britney took themselves off the block as expected, and half the house were ready for Turner to name Taylor and Nicole as the replacement nominees, but that didn't happen. Instead, Turner stood up, gave a speech calling out the house for treating Taylor absolutely horribly throughout the beginning of the game, and he nominated Terrance and Ameerah. This sent shockwaves throughout the house. So many jaws dropped when Turner made this move because everyone that wasn't in the Leftovers didn't have a clue that it was happening. Half the people there expected Taylor to go up on the block. So after that didn't happen and the meeting was adjourned, they were left crying, confused, and clueless as to what was really going on. Ameerah had been running the game up to this point, so to see her get blindsided at the veto meeting was nuts. And as if that wasn't enough, Ameerah and her side were blindsided again once Ameerah was evicted at the end of the week. God, this really is like my favorite week of Big Brother ever, and it was some of the most exhilarating stuff I have ever watched unfold live.
I'm looking forward for this next veto meeting so we can go ahead and get Taylor on the block and get her out of here. Big Brother isn't as hard as I thought it was going to be.
We have decided to use the power of veto to save ourselves.
I'm sorry, but Terrance and Ameerah. There was clearly one target this house had, but I really don't want to add to the dog pile I feel like is going on in this house. It's not okay.
I'm trying to figure out who the hell in this house he's aligned with that makes him think he has the balls to put me on the block.
What is happening?
Big Brother 20 had a lot of blindsides, and in the wake of the James Hewling era, this season really felt like blindside heaven. Most times the blindsides were at the evictions, but there were a couple veto meeting blindsides as well, and one of my favorite ones happened at the beginning of the game. In the beginning of the season, the house was split nearly perfectly down the middle, with the Faute side in the level 6 side. Kaitlyn had just somewhat betrayed the Faute Alliance after voting out Steve in week 1, but after winning the second HOH, her loyalties went right back to them, and they seemed poised to retake control of the game. Kaitlyn nominated Winston and Scotty for eviction, which was kinda weird because that was one player from each side, but regardless, Winston was the intended target for the Faute Alliance. Tyler ended up winning the veto, and the initial thought process was that Tyler would save Winston with the veto, since they were in the level 6 alliance together. Kaitlyn would then put someone like Brett on the block, and Scotty would probably be evicted in a close vote. However, Tyler had other things in mind. Firstly, Tyler wanted to use the veto on Scotty instead of Winston, because this way, he could feign that he was actually aligned with the Faute side. Which is funny, because he was about to take a shot at the leader of their alliance, Swaggy C. Swaggy was the biggest obstacle in Tyler's way from completely running the house, so Tyler wanted him gone. In week 1, Swaggy had made an offhand comment about Kaitlyn being a loose cannon. Tyler used this as ammunition in his pitch to get Kaitlyn to flip in that first week, and now he was going to use it again to try and take him out of the game. Kaitlyn hated the feeling of being constantly underestimated and underappreciated, so it didn't take much for Tyler to push Kaitlyn to stand up for herself. And what better way to do that than to backdoor Swaggy? Kaitlyn was very on board with this plan, and once Tyler secured the veto, the blindside became imminent. Prior to the veto meeting, Kaitlyn gave slight hints to her allies Haley and Fessy that they might not like what happens at the ceremony, basically giving them a not-so-fun sample of what was to come. At the veto ceremony, Tyler used the veto to save Scotty, and with tears in her eyes, Kaitlyn blindsided the hell out of Swaggy C by nominating him for eviction. What's even crazier is that when eviction night came, Swaggy thought he had rallied the votes to stay, but he was blindsided again when he was evicted in a vote of 8-4, giving us 2 blindsides in the week. The build-up, the execution, and the aftermath of this blindside is straight cinema, a 3-part masterpiece, and it easily makes this list.
Ty Dolla $ign wins the veto. I'm happy because Winston did not win. Sorry, buddy, because your time in the Big Brother house is clocked out soon, too.
This is my time for America to see I'm not gonna be walked over. Yeah. I really hope we can stay friends after what you're about to do.
I have decided to use the power of veto on Scotty.
I'm really sorry for those of you that are gonna be angry at me. So I'm really sorry, Swaggy.
Coming to Big Brother, I knew at any given time it could be my time to go, and I had to be ready for that.
Coming in next, we're going to visit one of Big Brother's most iconic weeks of all time, Big Brother 6's Pressure Cooker Week. After Kaysar re-entered the game at the final 10, the house guests were locked inside a box, and the last player standing would become the HOH. After over half a day, only Kaysar and Jennifer remained, and they were at a standstill since they were on 2 different sides of a warring house. Jennifer was with the Friendship Alliance, and Kaysar was with the Sovereign 6 Alliance, so each of them couldn't risk losing and giving the other side control of the house. However, there was one player in the game that they both wanted to target: James. James had won practically every veto of the season up to that point, and he was a gigantic threat. So Kaysar made a deal with Jennifer and agreed to give her the HOH if she promised to nominate 2 people from her alliance and then backdoor James after the veto. Jennifer agreed to the deal, and Kaysar gave her the HOH. Although Jennifer instantly went back on one part of the deal after she didn't nominate 2 people from her alliance and instead nominated Rachel and Janelle, it didn't really matter because the only part of the deal that actually mattered was that James would be the backdoor target. And that was legitimately still the game plan from all sides of the house. Rachel went on to win the veto, and everything was set in place for James to be named the replacement and voted out of the house. But things got a little interesting. Jennifer and her alliance started to realize that maybe James wasn't the biggest threat to their game right now, and instead, maybe it was Kaysar. Yeah, James was a calm threat, but he was on an island of his own right now, whereas Kaysar just came back into the house and rallied his alliance back together with himself at the head. That seemed much more dangerous than James, so a new plan was secretly formed, and Kaysar's side had no idea. So, at the veto meeting, Rachel took herself off the block, and the Sovereign Six and James were blindsided when James wasn't named the replacement nominee, but rather Kaysar. James's physical jolt of shock once he realized he wasn't getting backdoored will forever be ingrained into my mind, because you could tell that he really expected to go on the block, and he wasn't the only one who thought that. Basically, everyone from the Sovereign Six felt betrayed and blindsided, and I believe that this was Big Brother's first truly shocking veto meeting.
Honestly, I don't think Jennifer has the courage to leave James in the game. Based on logic, I don't see her doing it.
I'm going to use the veto to save myself.
Everybody in this house does not trust James. I've thought about this a lot, and I nominate Kaysar.
I broke my word. Duh.
I feel personally betrayed and let down this week.
If I win HOH, I'm gonna tell the bitch to pack her bags.
They wanted me out. They've just proven themselves to be cowards.
Up next, we're revisiting Big Brother 24, but this is a much more weird situation than the first one, because not only did this veto blindside the player that was being saved, but it also didn't really have much of an impact on anything. And that was when Terrance used the veto to save Turner during the split house week of Big Brother 24. The way the split house worked is that there were two HOHs crowned for the week, that being Michael and Terrance, and the two of them took turns doing a schoolyard draft, each choosing 4 players to join them in their respective side of the house. Terrance selected Alyssa, Turner, Joseph, and Kyle to join him in the backyard for the week, which was a terrible outcome for some of the players. Turner, Joseph, and Kyle were all secretly in the Leftovers alliance that Alyssa and Terrance didn't know about, but with Terrance in power and it being obvious that he didn't want to target Alyssa, it looked like the 3 boys were gonna be in trouble, and Kyle and Joseph were the expected nominations. However, instead of fighting it out honorably or whatever, Kyle had a different idea. Kyle was actually in a showmance with Alyssa, so in an attempt to keep both himself and her safe for the week, he secretly spilled the beans and exposed the Leftovers alliance to Terrance and Alyssa, leading to Terrance changing his mind about nominating Kyle, and he instead nominated Turner next to Joseph. This in itself was already a blindside to Turner, because he was expecting Kyle to go up on the block, not himself, so he was already confused. Terrance then went on to win the veto as well, and he gave absolutely zero indication that he would use it, so everyone assumed that the nominations would stay the same. But then, at the veto meeting, out of nowhere, Terrance used the veto to save Turner and replaced him with Kyle. What? Kyle was blindsided. Alyssa was blindsided. Turner was blindsided, but in a good way. Not a single person other than Terrance had a clue as to what was going on, and that includes us viewers too. Due to some fans trying to influence the game from the outside world by screaming information over the outside wall, the CBS crew shut off the live feeds for basically the entire week, so even we were left blindsided by this veto move. Did Terrance have a secret plan to take Kyle out? Was he actually this mastermind with a crazy plan to steamroll through the rest of the game? No. Terrance simply hoped that by putting Kyle on the block next to Joseph, each of them would continue to spill their secrets in the game to try and stay, and Terrance would be able to collect more information as to what's been happening behind his back. On one hand, I can maybe see a tiny bit of merit to this idea, but I think in the grand scheme of things, this move was way too unnecessary and messy, and there was no reason to blindside everyone and possibly piss off Kyle and Alyssa when you were still planning on evicting Joseph anyways. It was just a really weird and unique instance of a veto meeting blindside, because it's not often that the person being saved is the one being blindsided, so I felt it would be a perfect one to include in this video.
I am so happy Terrance won. We all thought Terrance was a dud, but turns out he's a stud. And now I just have to get him to keep the nominations the same.
I have decided to use the power veto on Turner. Kyle.
Yo, what just happened? Terrance uses the veto when he tells me he's not going to, and now I'm up on the block.
Terrance blindsides me in the best possible way by taking me off the block.
Now, to close things off, I was originally going to talk about the obvious veto meeting blindside during Dan's funeral week in Big Brother 14, where Dan had convinced Frank and Jen ahead of time to use the veto on him and nominate Britney, which blindsided half of the house and capped off the most glorious week in all of Big Brother. But I feel like I've talked about that one quite a bit. I'll still include a clip of it at the end because it totally deserves it, but there's another equally exciting veto meeting blindside that Dan was a part of that I surprisingly have barely spoken about on this channel. So I'm calling an audible and talking about that one instead. You may have heard about this one. Replacement nominee roulette. For a bit of background information, at the final 7 HOH of Big Brother 10, it came down to Ali and Dan. Knowing that he only had a few minutes left in him, Dan offered Ali the deal of a lifetime, saying that if Ali threw the HOH to him, then Dan would only choose one initial nominee, and Ali would make literally every other decision for the week. This was the deal of all deals, as Ali would get practically all the power of HOH, yet would still get to compete for HOH the following week. So Ali agreed and gave Dan the HOH win. If this deal seemed way too good to be true, that's because it was, but Dan needed to pretend like it was real in order to keep Ali in his good graces for the first part of the week. Ali wanted to protect Michelle, and he wanted to target Memphis, and it looked like Dan was honoring his deal once he nominated Jerry and Memphis for eviction. Memphis went on to win the veto to save himself though, so according to the deal, Ali was supposed to choose the replacement nominee as well, and he told Dan that he wanted Keisha to be the replacement nominee. And this is where things get fun. Dan told Ali that he would nominate Keisha, but secretly, he wasn't going to do it because he was aligned with Keisha. So, to add to the fireworks, Dan made a plan before the veto meeting. He talked to all 4 of the potential nominees and asked them if they would be willing to say who they would want nominated at the veto meeting, and everyone agreed to do it. So, at the veto ceremony, Dan said, we're going to play a game called Replacement Nominee Roulette, and he made each person point the finger at someone else and say that they wanted them to be nominated, which was just some precursor fireworks before the main event. After everyone said a name, Dan made a speech saying that anytime you gamble, you're taking a risk, and sometimes it doesn't work out. In this case, Ali, you lost the bet. Michelle, you're going up on the block. This was a massive blindside to Ali and Michelle, as they fully believed throughout the week that Dan was going to honor the deal that they had made during the HOH comp and keep both of them safe. To say that they were pissed off would be a severe understatement, as Ali had a large but justified meltdown following the meeting, showcasing just how much of a betrayal and blindside this actually was. Michelle and Ali were subsequently evicted over the next 2 rounds, serving as a fitting end to this iconic veto meeting blindside.
Dan is going to have to either replace Memphis with Rennie or Keisha. So they're not going to like Dan too well after this week.
I will be using the power of veto on myself to take myself off the block.
So right now we're going to play a game. Replacement nominee roulette. If you choose not to participate, you're going up.
Okay, Keisha.
Rennie.
Michelle. I'll say Ali.
Anytime when you gamble, you're taking a risk. And unfortunately, you better know who's making a bet for you. And in this case, Ali, you lost the bet. Michelle, go on the block.
How did I get backdoored for somebody else's deal? Seriously, do you think I'm stupid? Does it have stupid on my head?
Big ups to Dan if that's what he wanted. He's really done nothing in this game but piss people off.
And there we go. Blindsides in Big Brother are some of the best treats we can receive as viewers, and I think veto meeting blindsides are pretty overlooked compared to the eviction blindsides. Being able to see the reactions in the diary room after the fact are an added component that we just don't get during evictions. And while a live reaction will admittedly always reign supreme, I'm never gonna say no to a veto meeting blindside. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you're new here, consider subscribing. I, of course, need to give that extra special shout out to all of my YouTube members and patrons who would never be blindsided at a veto meeting because they are all way too smart to not see something like that coming. And, as always, here's a clip for you on your way out.
I have decided to use the power of veto on Dan.
Ian, you won the veto, so I can't put you up. I gotta do the next best thing and put your closest ally up on the block. Britney, pop a squat.
Jen just used the veto on me. Jen just used the veto on me. My plan actually worked.
If he thought I was coming after him before, I'm coming after him now.
I just feel really, really dead.